Cool. Looks like we're live. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the March edition, MacAdmin Monthly. Good to see you all again. It's a pretty good turnout. Let's see, do we have the live stream going? Yep, cool. So not a super strict agenda today. I think there's plenty to talk about in general, so happy to have more of an open format than we've had previously. But also we're joined today by Nick, who has I don't know if y'all saw the link that I put in the Slack channel, but Nick put together a really cool like bake off of all the macOS MDM providers that he went through, and I won't steal your thunder. But anyway, so we could talk about queue up your MDM thoughts, and Henry, I'm sure you'll have some ideas. But yeah, maybe to kick things off, I'll hand it over to you, Nick, if you want to do a cool intro.
Sure. I guess just to kind of give a quick background, I definitely do not have the same Mac experience that probably any of you have here on this call for sure. I was primarily a Windows admin, heavy focus with SCCM and Windows engineering for, probably about 10 years before I got put into the Mac space. That was kind of a let's see if this works. And the folks I was interviewing with were like, hey, you demonstrated you can do this on Windows. I don't see why you can't translate that over to Mac OS. So had a pretty cool boss that gave me a shot at that, and I'm really starting to like it. So that was about 4 years ago. And so I've just kind of gone head first into it since. So it's really nice. One of the big benefits with that, especially is when I'm training people that I work with, it makes it a lot easier to translate how things work between Windows and Mac. When we have, especially at my company, where we have 70,000 endpoints and nearly all 70,000 of those are Windows, and we have 400 Mac OS computers. So it's a very heavy disparity. But the vast majority of my Mac users are all C-suite level execs who, you know how that goes. They require a lot of hand-holding, a lot of special attention. So that's why they get to pay 3 people. So I'm one of 3 people who just support Macs at this company. So
love the level of attention too.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So and on top of the fact that we're extremely heavily security focused. So anyhow, so that company that I worked for, I don't think there's any issue with talking about it as Carbon Health, which is a like a primary health style, like not like urgent care, non-emergency care facilities throughout the country. As a startup when I got there, and they had kind of had all of their endpoint management had been just kind of done spur of the moment. So they had a managed service provider that just kind of said, hey, we're doing Meraki for all of your networking at all your clinics, so why don't we just use Meraki Systems Manager for your Macs and your iPads and stuff. So that turned into quite the mess. So when I got there, my biggest project was to evaluate and get us moved over to an MDM that could actually function. And so that's kind of what spurred this whole project. And there's, a little bit of budget constraints, of course, like everywhere, you're not just going to always have open purse strings. But I really started in there with, I had worked with Jamf. I had my Jamf 200 or whatever the hell certification it is. And there were definitely some limitations that I wasn't really a big fan of. So I started looking into other MDMs. The biggest ones that I looked into were Conji and Mosel, mostly because, the cost was a little bit easier. But I think one of the biggest things that pushed me away from Jamf, at least at that particular organization, was that Conji and Mosel, at least at the time, did not have a separate licensing for support, essentially. So you didn't have a support level that you had to pay separately for. So Mosel and Conji stuff was just included in, your monthly device license fee. So that was a big motivating factor. So I could, more easily have other coworkers, start learning the MDM and get help where they needed to. Gosh, I don't even know where to go from here.
Well, yeah, I was gonna ask you a bit
Yeah, go for
about
it.
what inspired you to, document your journey, going down this, and not only that, but build out like a comparison table. And
I mean, it's kind of just like what's in what I put in my blog, where when I started going through that project and realizing just how extensive it was, I was finding that there weren't any real good resources from an administrative or engineering standpoint to be able to compare MDMs. Everything you look up is usually boils down to some kind of Gartner magic square or whatever they call it. And that's not at all useful to the technical people trying to implement things. Like, that's useful for your boss to say, oh, well, Jamf is the gold standard. And I hate hearing that phrase because it's always thrown about by everybody I talk to. And so I just kind of, like I said, I just realized like I need to figure this out. And so I just took it upon myself to just start figuring out what I needed. I don't know how many iterations in that table I went through before even publishing it to GitHub. So like version history is very, very long, where, I was going through and looking at very specific features and realizing I needed to generalize them a little bit more and then get more specific again. That's also when, at least with Mosel and Kanji, where they were both coming out with their Jamf Connect equivalents for identity management with cloud IDPs. And so that was another factor where that kind of came into play mid-project was, at least at the time, Kanji's extra cost for their equivalent was, I think, double what Mosel's was. And so that was a large factor. There's a lot of factors that kind of pushed me toward Mosel, but yeah, I was trying to figure out, I guess, what was just going to be easiest. Because, like I said, the company I work for was healthcare. So you obviously have, there needs to be a high level of security. You've got PII that you have to deal with, that kind of thing. But at the same time, the company itself had no on-prem infrastructure whatsoever. So every single clinic was running a Meraki device for their network connection to be able to connect to the clinics and then into their in-house app for electronic data records or health records. And I think I don't remember if they were housing it in AWS or Azure, but either way, everything was cloud. So there's no on-prem infrastructure to deal with. So that was already something that I was like, all right, probably don't need Jamf for anything with some of their on-prem capabilities. And another thing that really ended up influencing me, especially because with healthcare, we needed a lot of like RBAC for access to certain things, whether that was, the ability to install things on your own on the machine, if you're a developer, if you're an engineer, whatever, versus, locking things down more tightly for kiosk style Macs that are being used at the front desk of the clinics. And they had a pretty decent setup within Okta, because Okta was the IDP for, designating those roles for, various Okta apps and that kind of thing. One of the things I found frustrating with Jamf is that they didn't have a really true directory services integration, and I still don't think they do, mostly because their ability to scope things to those groups is limited to just that limitations piece within a policy. Whereas Mosel and Kanji had the ability to actually sync directly and create groups that could be used for more than one thing. So I could actually have a whatever. So in this case, Mosel. So I could have a Mosel group that was, all computers that are, with users in part of this group, that kind of thing. So that I could target that, not just for application deployments, but also configuration profiles, because sometimes they needed different settings here and there. It also made it easier for enrollment. I was able to basically just do really everything I needed within Mosel, which was really nice.
Nice.
Gosh, I don't know. Sorry, I tend to kind of ramble, so please cut me off if you have questions. Like seriously, I'm not going to object to that.
Yeah, no, I think we definitely can all relate to the Henry. I saw you mentioned Skim. It's definitely been like a big theme for us too. Like services
Yep.
that support Skim go to the top of the list.
Yep. Yeah, skim provisioning is great. That was another part that came into play here too. Well, not really. I don't think it came into play with the decision on the MDM, but at the same time, I was also migrating over to the full Apple Business Manager Federation and skim provisioning as well, which was an interesting challenge, especially for devices that had already been enrolled and people were signing into with their personal Apple IDs. So that was a lot of fun. But
yeah, one thing that I really appreciate seeing on this chart when I was looking through it was that you included and the blog too, all the information about billing and pricing, because I find that tends to be one of the hardest things to get info on. And I know that I've gone through this where it's like, okay, cool, like we've figured out the feature set we need in our requirements, and then you get all the way down the line, and then it's like, okay, half of these are add-ons,
right,
and that really changes your assessment.
Yeah,
it's good to see transparency there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that was something that I was constantly having to, like you said, update my boss and his boss about where we were at, what we were looking at, what budget amounts to put in there, and then again, because this was a migration, we also had to look at how quickly we could remove licenses from the previous MDM from Meraki in order to recoup those or not have to renew them. So, because just like with most MDM products, is if you've got a computer object in there, that's a license, whether doesn't matter if it's in two different MDMs kind of thing. And so another part of one of the hard parts with Meraki was that aside from their API being really terrible, they didn't have the ability to like access or escrow any activation lock bypass codes or personal recovery keys, anything like that. So that all had to be manually done.
Interesting.
And yeah, so we definitely had to keep a lot of devices in both Mosul even after they were migrated, keep it in Meraki until we could verify like the PRKs have been rotated, that kind of thing.
So I'm curious, for a fleet of you said about 400 devices, how long was this total like transition period?
Oh no, sorry, for the blog for that company, that was not here.
Okay.
So that healthcare company, oh gosh, we had between 2,000 and 3,000 Macs.
Okay.
And 3,000 to 5,000 iPads of various
Got it.
various use cases. So they had a whole bunch of iPads that they literally spent the money to buy an entire iPad just to be a room sign on the outside of a clinic door.
Yeah.
So
love that. Big budget.
Yeah, dude, they burned through all their VC money so fast when COVID came through, because they were one of the largest testing providers in the state of California when COVID went through. Like, I don't know if you ever read when they did the huge testing centers in Dodger Stadium, but that was all that company that did that. So they had just this ridiculous influx of money from VCs, from the state of California. State of Nevada was another big one, and they just overhired. And I think I just talked to a colleague this morning. They're on their 6th round of layoffs, 5th since I left. So anyhow, but yeah, it was about 3,000 Macs was the big one, obviously. So 5,000 to 8,000 total devices. I can't remember off the top of my head. Didn't actually get through the entire process, unfortunately, because like I said, they started going through layoffs, and I saw the writing on the wall and moved on to other things. But I did have it set up to where. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I did have it set up to where we were already in the process of migrating. Assuming that I had been able to, stay there and, finances weren't an issue, I would have ended up going out to a couple of the clinics just to monitor the first few. And then we had a couple of local IT, IT support folks who live near a few of the clinics who helped us, helped with migrating a few of them. The biggest issue we really had was around the kiosks, because no matter how many times you write instructions, um, I was kind of hamstrung because security was saying they have to have file vault enabled, but they didn't want to allow us to have a generic account to be able to get past file vault. So the user who enrolls the machine powers off the machine and goes home and doesn't come back to the clinic the next day, and then nobody can use the computer.
Right.
Because another part of it too was like, why don't you just keep the machines on? Like, well, we have to move them. Like, what do you mean? These are iMacs. Like, oh no, we unplug them and put them in a closet so they're not viewable from the window, so that people don't get tempted to break into the clinics and steal them.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it was quite fun trying to create documentation to explain that and still have people not pay attention to it. So
Wow.
that was my biggest challenge. Other than that, the enrollments and the erasing and all that stuff went pretty smoothly, for the most part.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think that is one of the pains in switching MDMs is just what you mentioned about like the double billing of like the period of time in which you need to support both services, and
Right.
that sort of burn down does take a lot of manual work.
Actually,
Yeah.
I have a question. It sounds like when you've transitioned from Meraki, these are these kind of situations where you discover some lack of features you might expect. I'm not fully sure on Meraki, but I heard that there's no capability in some products to just like remove the MDM profile. So
Yeah, so that was one that I discovered, and I found there is a workaround for it, but you have to go into their equivalent of JAMS pre-stage or your ADE settings, and you have to scope a different enrollment profile that allows the removal of the MDM profile, and then re-push it to those machines and verify that it is resynced, and then you can do the removal manually from the target machine. But
That's
yeah,
fun.
the thing that was really challenging about Meraki is that they have essentially two different types of enrollment, and a bunch of their features and feature sets are only scoped to one of the two types. And so they have the enrollment, so your MDM, your true MDM enrollment, which is obviously going to give you all your MDM commands, through APNS. But they also have their separate agent, like Jamf has their binary. But they don't talk to each other on the local machine, so they're unaware of which one is actually active. And so there are a bunch of features within trying to manage a device that you can't tell even by looking what's going through what channel. And so a lot of machines within the Meraki scope were partially managed, so some commands wouldn't work, some commands would, and you couldn't tell what was going on through it, and they had no repairability for anything.
And a little follow-up here, as you looked in depth at so many different products, and making those discoveries, how much time did you spend on that?
Well, I started at the company in, oh gosh, I want to say it was December, and we finally got started on rolling out in, I want to say, June. So I probably spent a solid 2 to 3 months just on the evaluation, and then the rest of the time was getting licensing and risk reviews and all that kind of stuff done through the review process that wasn't really formalized there.
It's honestly a lot faster than what I was expecting.
Yeah, and I think the reason I was able to do that faster has nothing to do with me and everything to do with how broken it was in the first place, and poorly managed. Because like I said, they had an MSP that was doing this. So the MSP just rolled all this stuff. They had different, they had a whole different VPP setup into Meraki that was pushing out apps under their VPP token for whatever they were using in addition to ours. So we had two different ones coming in and didn't know about it. And then even though we told them to stop managing the devices and only work on the networking stuff, I would constantly have audit logs showing that they're going in and deleting stuff and running people through enrollments that don't match the new processes I had put in place, that kind of thing. So it was a challenge, but yeah.
There's some war stories. Wow.
Yeah, that's one that I'll always remember a lot of. I still talk to a lot of the folks from there. I was one of the first ones to leave after the first round of layoffs, and a lot of these folks are still there, still kicking around, and I can't believe they haven't gotten out. But
well, so one question: how can well, first of all, are you accepting contributions to this MDM?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's a bunch of PRs that have gone through.
Cool.
So I definitely have not been the only one. So here, let me try this now.
Yeah, what's
the window? So if we go back to, you guys see this?
I think we
not right now.
Not yet.
So it's I see a faded window on YardStream, but I can't. I'm guessing that means it's not activated.
Oh, there it is.
There it goes. Okay. So I put a little note on the main part, the main README here for creating PRs, which is a goofy little link there. But if we go into like our pull requests, we'll see a whole bunch of people have contributed for things like Workspace ONE, which I never evaluated personally. I tried really hard not to put, for me personally, to put anything in there I hadn't actually worked with.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make sure that the other pieces were from people who have actually done those. So Jump Cloud and Workspace ONE and Intune, all, or at least based on their honor anyway, were added by folks who have actually utilized it. So
nice.
Yeah, quite a few contributions on there, and I try to get to them as quickly as I can. Life gets in the way here and there, but I don't think any of them have really sat for very long. But yeah, I converted it over to a markdown table recently because that makes it a lot easier to modify when you're doing your PRs. So
you have a feeling we'll see Zentral on here pretty soon.
Yeah, but it has to be, I think, from a user, not from the creators, right?
I think Jump Cloud and Addigy were both added by employees that work there, if I remember correctly. So that doesn't bother me. I mean, like, as long as it's accurate, and if anybody needs to call somebody out on it, that's totally fine. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be the police on it. So.
And the Git history doesn't lie. We can always see who put it there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yep. Henry.
Yeah.
Open source holds us accountable.
I think what would be cool one day too is to get a campaign going for, where possible, linking to documentation to support each of these things, which would be really cool. Obviously harder with some of them like Mosul, who all their stuff is behind a login. They don't have any public documentation for any of their stuff. But most of the others do. So I mean, you can put links in there to their documentation, and it just won't do anything until you actually log in to their platform. But
yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I love seeing that Vision OS is already on here.
I figured I'd just put it on there just because we have a couple of Vision Pros here that were
really.
Yeah. So without getting into too much detail, like we have, we're pretty high security. I work for Micron, make semiconductors. So we make, NVRAM and DRAM and all that kind of stuff. So, NVIDIA does well. We do really well too. But so it also means that we don't like people inside of our fabrication and R&D areas, even though we have, ridiculously expensive equipment. So one of the things that they did, especially during COVID, that was actually necessary was to figure out how to utilize the VR headsets so that vendors could help our technicians and engineers fix things.
Oh wow.
So that's one of the use cases there.
That might actually be the first practical application of VR that I've ever heard.
Yeah, well,
makes sense.
we got two of them, and we assume that one of them is just going to go to one of our C-suites. So
that makes more sense.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say it was for like giving tours, and you could just wear the headset, and the headset would automatically blur out the things you can't look at.
Oh, geez. That would require us to have like developers here to make an app for something other than Windows. Oh man.
Yeah, has anyone actually tried to manage like a Indian profile on Vision OS? I'm curious. Like, if
I haven't even touched them. Like, they all got shipped here, and they're with a different coworker. I've never even seen them. So they were stored in an office that had a water leak. So I was wondering if they got ruined, but
oh no.
No, I haven't seen anything. I did mess around a little bit with that emulator they have, like last year after they announced it, but other than that, no, not really.
Has anyone taken the Apple Store tour of the demo, the guided demo of Apple Vision Pro?
I heard it's great, but no, I haven't done it.
Yeah, I've heard it's worth doing. Even if you have a friend who's got one, like to get full like guided demos is really good.
What did you hear about it?
Just that it's
that
the demo is really well built. It's really well. It's a great story. It's a great narrative, and it takes you through, and it's worth doing. But I haven't done it.
Yeah. Afterwards, you just spend the money, I guess.
Yeah, that's the problem for me. If I go into the Apple Store, it's like not in my budget.
I understand that. My MacBook that I have at home was given to me by the healthcare company that I left. So that's the only reason I actually own an Apple product outside of a phone.
I've got a couple questions about
this
project that is on screen here. Are you surprised at the amount of attention that it's received?
A little bit. I don't remember what actually spurred it. It was probably about a year ago or so when it a few people started noticing. I just was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't think I was doing anything unique really, but apparently it kind of semi is. So
with that in mind, is there anything you would have done differently if you knew that we're starting over?
Like, you mean just for this piece right here?
Yeah.
The
piece that you're sharing with the world.
Maybe. I'm not sure. If I were more confident in my abilities, maybe I would set up my own site for my own blog and have it on there rather than on Git. And also piggybacking off of, the Sysman Squad guys. So those are guys that I worked with when I was doing, primarily Windows administration. So, and, I have my own domain like so many people do. So it wouldn't be probably too much of an effort, but I just haven't taken the time. I've been busy. I've got a young kid, so I like to spend time with her instead. So.
Great answer.
But yeah, maybe one day, because I think it would be, beneficial to be able to have it more on a single pane of glass kind of thing. Have the table actually in its own website or blog page so that it's not two separate entities. So.
I mean, I do love that, you went to a format that allows contributions. I think it's pretty compelling.
I figured that was the best option. I mean, I realized, it was a pain in the ass for me. If I can make it easier, I definitely utilize so many different people's open source projects and scripts and apps and stuff here. I mean, that's kind of the least I could do is, throw together a stupid table. Like I put it all together in Excel and I just used an Excel to HTML converter. Like it's not like I even put any of this stuff in manually. Once again, utilizing somebody else's contribution to make things easier. So,
I mean, this is a theme of Mac administration, I think. So, using the open source community mix, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do you having gone through this process, do you feel like you have more like expertise in the MacAdmin world, or is that something that do you feel like you're primarily Windows work, or are you kind of? Oh
no, I'm 100% Mac focused and have been, since the beginning of this project. Like I said, when I when I got hired on at that company, that's all they had there. Like they were the exact opposite of even what I'm at now, where they had 2,000 to 3,000 Macs, and I think they had 10 Windows machines in the entire clinic and in the entire company, and those were just to run a few specific X-ray machines. So like I still retain a lot of my my knowledge and experience from the Windows side, but some of that starts to fade, and it's not that it's necessarily forgotten, but when you don't practice it, you're not gonna recall everything right away. So I still use PowerShell as much as I possibly can because I love it so much more than Bash. I think that's been my biggest challenge is learning any kind of shell scripting here. Is I'm very much not used to not having an object-oriented language to use, and I never grew up learning Python. So I love any of my automations that I have that are sitting on automation boxes or in Azure Functions or whatever, all running PowerShell because that's just what I grew up using. But I'm learning a lot more, ZSH and Bash and Shell and kind of the difference with the POSIX compliance, that kind of stuff. It's challenging, but yeah, definitely learned a lot. Definitely forced me to learn a lot. And like I said, for me, the way my brain works is I try to translate everything I already know into what I need to know. So I constantly will just translate from, okay, in Windows, this would be this. So the equivalent in Mac would be this. And that's just kind of how I learn.
Do you deploy PowerShell to your Mac endpoints?
To mine, but not more broadly, no. It's available. I mean, I have it in self-service, but I use it because I'm part of a team that they do weird kind of designations here, but I'm part of the Mac team, but I'm also part of a different team that is more of like level 4 and 5 engineers who are experts in anything like kind of thing. And so I work very closely with our Exchange admins and our M365 admins and our SharePoint admins and stuff. So I help them a lot with PowerShell things because they typically do that working on the Windows side more. But I don't know. I find it easier most of the time. But no, I haven't deployed anything in production that would rely on PowerShell. I would like to, but there really haven't been any use cases just because I'd still, if I wrote it in PowerShell to push to an endpoint, I would still end up having to call other things to it. For notifications or whatever, and that would seem kind of pointless to me. So it's mostly just integrating with MG Graphs with the Microsoft Graph modules.
Well, should we talk about the hardware announcements that we just saw? Is anyone running a M3 yet?
We're ordering one. We just got a quote in from our VAR, so we're getting one in to test because our CIO, this will be his 4th MacBook Air since the beginning of the year.
All right.
So yeah, they get what they want. But yeah, I'm hoping to test out the dual display capabilities to make sure everything works because we were primarily a Dell shop on the Windows side, and so we utilize the Dell docks even for Mac. And so testing those out. I didn't fully read all the specs, but it'll kind of find out if it's, I assume, actually, I don't even know if we'll have to use the USB-C or the Thunderbolt dock that we have. So at least we'll be able to get rid of display link, and hopefully that'll be a little bit less resource intensive for display link having to carry the load
Nice.
for that mirrored display.
Yeah, we haven't really used the airs much, so I feel like I wonder if now that they have they're all on Apple Silicon, if that'll change things for us.
Yeah, we bought, before I started at this company, my predecessor, they had like some budget thing, and so they just bought a couple hundred MacBook Airs. They were the 2020, the original M1 models, and they were all 8 gigs, and they couldn't handle any of our security stack of applications. And so we just had them, let's see, that was 4 years ago, and I still have 30 of them that I just barely opened the cellophane wrapping on, and we're actually going to sell them back to Apple. So it's hopefully, yeah, I'm hopeful that the new the M3 base will help make these a little bit more viable as an option for people.
Yeah. And now I think we got a request from our mobile developer teams to look at the M3 Maxes as a potential upgrade change from, I think most of them are running M1s right now. So they sort of sat out the M2 upgrade, and now are.
Yeah.
I'm curious. It looks like they did a bunch of benchmarking and found some major improvements in build times and stuff like that. So
what do you guys use for benchmarking your hardware, or do you?
Well, so for the development teams have their own metrics that they stream from their build tools. So I think we primarily rely on that.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Curious if anyone else has
I don't know if anybody used Passmark or things like that for anything.
When we were measuring things at Google, it was always the particular teams, I don't know, the Chrome dev team, how long does it take to compile Chrome? That's the benchmark. And they had that down to if we made a change that affected it by 0.5%, we had people hey, what's happening? So
wow.
I exaggerate a little bit, and it wasn't quite that bad, but they did, they were very, they watched that pretty well. So yeah, I think it's more practical benchmarks because the artificial ones aren't as useful. I mean, they could be useful just to, from a outside perspective, just getting a feel for things. But when you're actually, if you want to know how actually does it actually do the job that you're asking it to do, it's a good thing to do. And if you can find a repeatable thing for that, then that's good.
Yeah.
Good way to test.
I agree. I've been trying to push the powers that be here to not put so much reliance on just running a Passmark or Geekbench style test. It doesn't. The only thing that'll really tell you, in my opinion, is if we have a new security app that we're looking at. So we run an antivirus client, we run a VPN client, we run a proxy client, we run a DLP client, we run a privilege management client. So stacking all those can add up to some definite reduction in performance, but swapping one out for a new product, to test, that's really about the only benefit I've ever seen with, those standard style benchmarking test apps.
Yeah, benchmarks tell you how well the device runs the benchmark.
Yeah, that's a great. I like that.
That's funny. Yeah, I think one of the, speaking of security tooling and agents, something we learned recently is that the tool we're deploying to protect us against data exfiltration, it's monitoring uploads, isn't compatible with the tool that we're running to do cloud backups of endpoints. So we're why are we seeing these crazy spikes in memory usage on all these machines? People were complaining about their machine slowing down.
Are you using Digital Guardian too?
I think this is a code 42.
If you're allowed to say. No, yeah, Code 42 is the backup. Digital Guardian is a DLP. I've used Code 42 before. I don't understand what are your practical benefits for using that over, assuming you're not a Microsoft shop anyway, of like OneDrive and doing known folder move kind of thing. Like, is that just a C-suite kind of requirement to make sure that people are happy, or?
Yeah, I think, so we're using Code 42's like, I don't know what specific product it's called. It's not the like backup. It's like the process monitoring.
Oh, wait, Code 42 has their own DLP product?
They do.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, sorry, I got that mixed up.
But yeah, no, I mean it's a good question. I don't think that we don't have. For us, it'd be like Google Workspace because we're primarily like Google.
Oh, okay.
And I think there was a decision at some point from like the corporate security side to not rely on like the Google Cloud Sync or like the desktop application.
Interesting.
I think that might be more of a contractual thing then.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a insider.
Oh, that's a wonderful name. I feel like somebody named that 15 years ago. Like, oh, this would be cool.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the issues when we reported, to the Code 42 team, like, hey, we're seeing this issue. They were like, how often are you running the, endpoint health check utility, which we didn't even know about. So 0 times. And so now we've automated running the health check, and now we're getting errors in our logs that say we're running it too frequently. Okay, now we're asking too many times.
Wait, not like that.
Yeah,
oh,
I don't know what it is, but I feel like these like security mandated agents are always the most difficult to deploy correctly. I feel like there's the largest number of caveats.
Yep. Well, then if you're just dealing with the endpoint side, you may not necessarily be allowed or privy to anything that's going on the cloud infrastructure configuration piece. Like that's what I deal with all the time here, is where, like I said, we have always on VPN with split tunnel, but we also have proxy, and our proxy is also different. If we're inside the corporate network, we're using a local proxy. And then if we're outside, we're using Zscaler, and they don't they don't match up the configurations for either of those. So like some MDM commands will work when you're inside the office, and others will work when you're on VPN. But you can't activate Office while you're on VPN, but you can activate it while you're inside the office. So it's but it's always comes back to me like, oh, well, the Mac build is wrong. I'm like, it's not wrong. I promise. Like, I run MacUvalUtil on automation, to run it daily. I daily backup the proxy pack file that's applied to my interface every day, so I have a history, so I know when you guys change something and don't tell me, that kind of thing. Like, it's not, these things are pretty smooth if you're not interfering with things. Like, Digital Guardian DLP was for like 6 months, would just randomly interfere with and kill LaunchD on Macs. Like, no explanation why. Their own logging of their own app didn't even log a reason why it killed LaunchD. So the vendor's like, oh, well, if you can't show me proof that it did it, I'm like, I'm showing you the screenshot of the notification that says it's killing LaunchD, but just because you don't have a log for it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Like, what do you want me to do? So it's very, security apps are not my friend.
That Mac evaluation utility is golden. It is so amazing. And I used to recommend people use the Apple Push Diagnostics from Two Canoe Software, and that's discontinued now. It's discontinued, and the recommendation is to use Mac evaluation utility.
Oh, wow.
Because it does all the same stuff that the Push Diagnostics did.
Okay. Yeah, I do like being able to add custom endpoints too into Mac eval utility. So we'll do that with all of our Jamf and Microsoft endpoints as well, just to make sure that we have connectivity, because we have that all the time where if either our VPN solution or our proxy solution fail to connect, the device is basically soft bricked because security refuses to allow exceptions to, endpoints going out to Jamf or APNS. I'm like, oh, well, we need to because of security. I'm like, no, you don't. And then on top of that, they do SSL inspection, so they break the chain anyway, so it still doesn't work. So it was, we paid for Apple professional services, so we had I'm trying to remember his name. I think it was Eric Benfer from Apple come out here for a week, and I listened to him talking to our security guys like face to face. We're like, yep, we knew this, and this, and every single one of them, our security guys, like, yeah, but do we really need to disable inspection on there? Like, yes, that's how you get the stuff to function, So, because we have devices. I came across a device the other day that had 1,500 pending MDM commands on it, and its last check-in and inventory within the last week. Like, it just piles up because there's just so much traffic that is just given the middle finger to.
Yeah, it's a struggle when security requirements are that strict.
The thing is, they're not. What irritates me here personally is that they're not that strict on the Windows side. They actually are. They scrutinize more on the Mac side, which blows my mind. But
yeah, in some environments it's the exact opposite. So that's interesting too.
Yeah. They're pushing for device compliance here, which we're at a place where we could technically roll it out. I just am really nervous about it because it's shown as kind of buggy here and there, where the compliance status will flip and then you can't access any of your Azure or Entra ID resources. And I know that as soon as that gets to one of our execs and they encounter that during a meeting or something like that, they're going to flip a lid. So I'm just slow rolling that as much as possible. So
speaking of your execs, how do you handle making sure that their apps and OS is up to date in a timely? How do you encourage them to update things in a way that doesn't interrupt
that's a great question. So, like I said, they pay me and two other people to manage the Mac environment, but our executive staff also has their own separate like field services staff. Mm-hmm. And so for the most part, we exclude our top level VIP list, we call it, from basically anything and everything.
Except for security stack, right?
No. Well, I mean, from updates.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Well, you'd be surprised even there. Some of that stuff happens. Like,
I don't think I would actually.
And so typically what our process is once we've rolled it out to the rest of the company, we wait a week or so, and then we let the manager of that executive support team know, like, hey, XYZ need to be done. Here's a list of, people that need to have this done. And so they'll schedule it appropriately, and we just make it available self-service, where possible. There's a few things that we've been able to push automated as long as they don't have an impact. So one of we run a trio of 3 launch agents that are monitoring network state changes. So that first off, we can get away from using Jamf's network state triggers, because rumor is those are going to be deprecated soon anyway. But they monitor the network for ensuring that our DNS search domains are applied to whatever the active interface is. The other one is to make sure that a proxy pack file is applied to the interface, something there. And then the other one is to check the Wi-Fi toggle, basically just to toggle it back on once. So if it gets turned off, it'll automatically toggle it back on once. Or if Ethernet is connected, it'll turn off Wi-Fi. That's mostly what it is, so we can avoid bridge networks. So those work pretty well. Like that one I was able to push out without anything, because that doesn't really affect anything. So, but yeah, so then as far as like third-party apps, we actually just got, we're licensed now for Electrona Patch. which I really like. It's similar to Installamator, but it's a paid solution, which my company likes to have paid support for things, so which is fine. And so for the rest of the company, I have it set to where everything's just going to be automatic. So I have Microsoft apps and Zoom that are excluded from their automatic updates, because we have other things that control those. But everything else is just as it comes in, it'll auto update if it's not running. If it is running, it'll prompt the user. But for the execs, I don't even have the launch agent piece running on their machines. I only have the license applied and the binary installed. So new installs will run through that. It's fine. And then I have a self-service item that just runs their binary option, or binary that has an update all parameter on it. So they can just manually run that like whenever. And so our staff typically schedules like a 1 hour period of time a month to just say, especially for like our top 3 execs, like, the third Friday of the month or whatever, we get your computer for an hour, and then so they can go in and update whatever they need to. But it's a pain.
Oh yeah, good question, Henry.
Monkey. Anything open source is not viewed favorably here.
Really?
No.
Okay.
They don't really look on that stuff favorably. Like there's a few scripts here and there that I use, but they're not so much open source as just other people posting scripts that are under an MIT license kind of thing. So also the infrastructure, I don't have confidence in our infrastructure for being able to house anything anywhere that I need to rely on getting access to. So with Electrona, they call out to their own API to validate your license key and grab a list of applications that are applicable and version numbers, and then based on that, then they call directly out to the vendor to grab their installation media. So I don't have to rely on any internal infrastructure, and it's inherently unreliable here. So, and again, the open source part, that would have taken probably 6 to 9 months to even get approved, assuming that I had the approval in the first place.
That's really interesting. I mean, I find that conversation. I think we talked about this a bit last month too. We had Kat Self joining us talking about InfoSec, and we talked about that theme of like, do we trust open source, which is like auditable and transparent,
Right.
or more than closed source? I mean, I've heard arguments on both sides, and I think it's kind of a fascinating topic of conversation.
I couldn't even get buy-in for Installamator, which Installamator, we could literally just do a local fork and just keep that static, and then we would control the entire installation script because it's not calling out anywhere other than its own self-contained script to go install things. And they're like, no, we don't want to do that. Like, okay. So.
Yeah, interesting.
I think sometimes, depending on the organization, these kind of things tend to be a little awkward from the outside perspective, but there's hardly a point to change that because it needs to have the approval from very high up. And so what's this battle? Where does it end in the end?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I was able to get approval for the budget. I was like, okay, cool, let's just do that. Then I don't have to have staff to maintain or do anything on it. It can just, kind of run. So. Are you guys using any of you guys use Jamf for your MDM, or one of yours if you're MSPs? Have you guys used what is that new Mac onboarding piece? Okay. I haven't either. I was just wondering, like I read up on it and it looks kind of interesting, and I was gonna try to experiment on my sandbox to see how that compared to our DEP notify script, which we, does what we needed to do. So I just didn't know if you guys had any experiences with it.
I have still the feeling that, since DP notify, that of course, original idea as I grasp it, maybe I'm wrong here, is to have something in between of that time, so that the users are aware, okay, something is going on. But it seems that many people spend so much time designing on that, and it's based on user experience kind of things, but actually how much user experience real feedback is there? Is it really backed up by the end users, or it's more like by the admins having, oh, I have a cool tool, what can I do with it? Sorry.
I definitely I've gone through that experience before. At least at my current company, the big one is that the demand from the high ups was, as soon as I'm dumped onto my desktop, I better be able to click on Outlook and Teams or whatever and get going. So having something there that says, "Hey, wait," it was kind of essential for us. But no, I agree with you 100% there. Like part of it is just like, what's the point? It can, it's that philosophy of like, do you want to handhold everything? Or do you want to, try to trust your users to understand that, hey, maybe some stuff is still going. I don't know. I like the idea of at least I would love to get rid of all of the Office apps out of our DEP notify script, just because that would make it go so much faster. Because, downloading 2 or 3 gigs worth of that crap, is like 80% of the time there. So, but at the same time, we also, we have to use a docutil to set the default doc and, that kind of thing. I don't know. It's just, it is what it is. It doesn't bother me any. So, and if the execs are happy, then, I have a job. So.
In Kanji for liftoff, you've got the choice of, do you want it to take the full screen so that users can't do anything, or
Right.
by default it's just a window that they can move around so they can see, all right, here's the things that are being installed. If you really want to do some other things, you want to open up Safari, fine. And then at the end, it's kind of like the completion. And there's a screen that has up to 4 things that are kind of, look at Mac basics. Do you want to go to the intranet? What are the things that you want to go to?
I did like liftoff when I was evaluating Kanji. Like that was pretty slick. I really actually did want to go with Kanji. Other than a couple of things, I think my biggest drawback with them was that you could really only utilize the blueprint style model, and that to me just seemed like, at least at the time, a large amount of blueprints that had to be maintained just to be able to change one thing across all of them. And I wasn't a big fan of that at the time. So, but most of their other stuff is really slick. The liftoff was great. I forget what their SSO piece was called for identity management.
Passport.
Passport. Yep. That worked well. Their integrations with Entra ID were good, with Okta as well. So it was all pretty smooth. I think they even had built-in Okta apps that they maintained to make it really easy to do that integration. So yeah, I liked it. Their API was easy to use, well documented. So I still follow their blogs because they have some good posts. So
with the blueprints, we introduced assignment rules, knowing that the main reason why people wanted that flexibility through IDP groups. And we start off with just assignment rules based on hardware, like is it Intel or is it Apple Silicon? And when we introduced that, people were like, but what I want is the IDP based assignment groups. I'm like, well, we'll get there. So now we've got the ability to assign by IDP group. So
That's awesome.
it makes
Yeah.
more sense, like in Okta or Azure, wherever your IDP is, like, hey, here's a group of people who need this app, so that you're doing that management in your IDP rather than in your MDM.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah, and that's another piece with, kind of pivoting back to a shortcoming of Jamf with not being able to do those integrations with IDP group memberships is like, I don't want to have to give my security team access directly into Jamf for things, but at the same time, they need to have an ability to, say, drop a user or computer name into a group that is part of a, let's say, security event investigation that will auto install a specialized app for forensic analysis kind of thing. And so it's a lot easier for them to just have access to modify the group in Entra than for me to have to, put together an API client and role and all that stuff and hope that, and because I can't scope it to only specific groups, they now have access to modify all the groups and hope that they don't mess it up in whatever their automation is because I don't have access to it. So it's, definitely beneficial to have that kind of thing. So,
which comes back to RBAC, right?
Yep.
Like, do you have access to the things that you need?
Yep. Or do you have access to more things than you need, which is what happens a lot. Yep.
RBAC creep.
Oh man. Yeah.
Well, cool guys. Any closing thoughts before we wrap this up? This was great.
I just appreciate the invite. This was nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining, Nick. It's awesome.
Please keep me on the invite for next time because I want to hear what you want to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we meet at the second Tuesday of every month. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, so we'll always announce it in the channel if you stay in that Slack channel.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap the stream up here.
All righty. Thanks, y'all. It's nice to meet you, everybody.
Thanks.
See you.
Have a good one.
Have a good day. Bye.